I do enjoy doing reactions to channels like Ryan Was and I Rocker and stuff like that when they've done their reactions to like an American in Australia, that kind of thing, or a reaction to Australian videos. But at the same time, I like it when I can find a video that's different and perhaps less mainstream that I can do a reaction on. And this video definitely falls into that category. I found their perspective to be interesting, to say the least. Now, before I jump into this video, I just want to say a huge thank you to all those people who have subscribed to my channel. I greatly appreciate your support, and also a huge thank you to those people who've been buying me a coffee to help me to continue with my channel. This is a new channel, so it's not monetized, so every little bit, like the buy me a coffee, which is linked in the description to this video, just helps me to be able to afford to continue to work on this channel and to hopefully build it up to a point where it can actually be monetized. So let's look at this new video.
Anytime you travel to another country, you're going to find things that are, well, different. And certainly anyone traveling to the US is going to find things that are weird, unusual, quirky. Pick your adjective. These are meant to be observations of Australia from the perspective of us as Americans, and not at all a diss on Australia or the Australians. Because quite frankly, the only thing better than Australia are the Australians.
Okay, I'll give her points for trying. I'll definitely give her that. But the thing is, she says she doesn't want to diss us, but she's basically introduced this video as being talking about us being, or our country, I'm not sure which she exactly means, being unusual, weird and quirky. So that's not saying, well, these are things that are different to America. No, that's putting a value judgment on it and saying these things about Australia are just weird. It does put a bit of a negative connotation on it. Maybe I am taking it the wrong way, but that's the way I see it. And I also felt that she didn't sound entirely genuine in that comment of the only thing better than Australia is Australians. It just didn't really sound genuine. It sounded a little bit patronising. I'd like to know what other people think.
That said, I'm going to start with the biggest surprise and really the only negative thing we have to say about our entire trip. The food is pretty bland.
So we went out for Italian tonight because Denise and I have been complaining that much of the food we've had here in Australia lacks seasoning. So we're hoping the Italians are going to come to the rescue here.
Now, we certainly didn't do high-end every meal, but we did visit a handful of nicer restaurants, and even then, we were never that impressed. Even their version of Mexican food was bland, and I'm a spice wimp.
So, Australian taco.
All right. Would like to have some taco sauce, but other than that.
Okay, I have to start by pointing out the bleeding obvious. And that is, in the first part where she's talking about Australian food being really, really bland, they're in a Red Rooster, which is an American restaurant. Now, this is the first time I've ever come across anybody saying that Australian food is bland. So I don't know what their standards are, because most, or pretty much every person who comes to Australia praises our food, talks about how wonderful our food is. If you are familiar with the channel One Pack Wanderers, they try so much of our food on their trip around Australia, and they're on a second trip around Australia now, and they have so much praise for our food, and that is the way that most Americans are when they come here. So, yeah, I don't know what the problem is with these people, if perhaps they are just used to a really, really, really salty diet or something. Because I know that we don't add a lot of salt and stuff to our food. If someone can perhaps tell me what the difference may be that makes them think that our food is so bland, do tell, because it's got me perplexed. Like I said, I've never heard anyone from America describe our food as being bland. So I think, well, I just don't know.
Another really surprising thing about Australia is that while highly regulated, gambling is legal. What we particularly noticed was that nearly every hotel and bar had a book room for sports betting.
Okay, so first question, is gambling not legal in the United States? If so, that's a bit curious. Now, I hear this occasionally on people from America's channels when they're talking about Australia, and they're saying that every hotel and bar has gambling, and that is not the case. There are places that do have gambling licenses, but that's not every hotel and bar in Australia. So just to clarify that.
And speaking of sports, lawn bowling, or bowls, is huge. Like, not uncommon to see full lawn bowling stadiums or centers or whatever they might be called.
When watching videos like this for review, never have a mouthful of drink when you're watching it. I just spat out my drink, trying not to laugh. Lawn bowls is not huge in Australia. Oh my goodness, that is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard a tourist say. Lawn bowls is definitely not hugely popular. It is popular with retirees, but it's not like you retire and you go and take up lawn bowls. A lot of the younger generation just can't be bothered with lawn bowls. So it is a somewhat low-key sport. It's not something that is hugely popular.
We visited a golf course for breakfast on a Sunday, and there were way more people arriving for lawn bowling than golf.
I don't suppose it occurred to them to ask if maybe there was some sort of lawn bowling tournament on at the time, because for the most part, golf is way, way more popular than lawn bowls. So the only thing I can think of is that they just happened to arrive at the golf course as people were arriving for a lawn bowls tournament. Any other time, chances are there would be more people at the golf course than at the lawn bowls club. I should probably also mention that there is no such thing as a lawn bowling stadium. There's a lawn bowls club, which will be generally a somewhat understated building with maybe a few lawn bowls greens within the grounds. There's certainly not a stadium. When I hear someone say stadium, I think about like a football stadium or a cricket stadium or a concert stadium, not a little building with a few lawn bowls greens around it.
Also, Aussies really like American sports, especially football. Our football, not their football.
Just what? Most Australians have never even watched American football. A majority of Australians are obsessed with AFL, as in Australian football, and couldn't give two hoots about American football. Oh my gosh, is this woman on some sort of strange drug or something? Or maybe someone was just trying to be nice to her. Perhaps they were at a pub somewhere and they saw American football on the screen and some Australian was taking the mickey out of them completely, and of course they didn't recognise what our humour is like and thought this person was being dead serious when they told them that Australians love American football. Honestly, the majority of Australians wouldn't know American football if they saw it.
Now, one surprising thing that we actually enjoyed was that the music of choice definitely leaned towards top 40s from the 1970s through the 2000s. We literally never heard a song that we didn't know and didn't like.
Now, actually, at this restaurant, we're starting to hear some 80s music, and it's kind of a flashback, as I was saying. You know,
Flashback for some of us.
Well, yes, some of us didn't drink and have fun in the 80s, but...
I drank and had fun in the 80s.
Did you?
Just listened to country music.
Seriously? I just don't understand this video at all. Maybe they were at restaurants that did play older music, and some restaurants do that because maybe if they are more upmarket restaurants, then they have a slightly older generation of people going there. People who are a little bit more settled financially and can afford high-end restaurants. But that said, Australian music is no different from American music. If you tune in to a normal radio station, you're going to hear a lot of the same music that you would hear in the United States. Our top 40 is contemporary. We don't all listen to 80s music. So, I don't know what she's talking about there. I do know that there are some radio stations that are kind of, your nostalgic radio stations that will play a lot of, 60s to 80s type music and don't necessarily play current hits. And I will also point out that in Australia, country music isn't as popular as what it is in America. But at the same time, just, oh my gosh.
So yes, I did drive on the left side of the road, and that will have its full video. However, there were a few surprising things of note. Firstly, Aussies love roundabouts, and coming from an area with very few, it added yet another stressor to the stress of driving on the left. That said, I do have to say that Aussie drivers, by and large, are pretty polite, at least on the open highway. No one really drove aggressively or super fast. Of course, that might be because they have automated speed enforcement. You go too quickly through a speed enforced area and you'll automatically get a ticket in the mail. That might be why we saw so few police or highway patrol officers on our trip.
So, apologies to Americans for the confusion caused by our roundabouts. Seems to me that a lot of Americans really struggle when they come to Australia and encounter our roundabouts. Now, I have to say, I found it interesting that she was saying about Australian drivers being polite. That's got to be a relative thing because, well, it depends on what state you're in. But, Australian drivers aren't necessarily polite. If you saw my last video, you saw how Australian drivers tend to react to people who are being twats. And I think perhaps what she's referring to is more about there isn't so much of that whole jostling on the highways with people trying to get past you because they know there's a good chance that there may be an unmarked police car that's going to come and book you. There may be a police car parked somewhere along the highway that's going to come after you and book you. Or there are fixed cameras somewhere along the highway. And yes, the demerit points and the fines for speeding in Australia make it just not worth speeding. That said, had they gone to some states, they may have found that there are people who, regardless of the speed laws, can be quite aggressive on the road. I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to get people upset. But there are definitely some states where drivers can be a little bit more aggressive than they are in other states.
As someone who appreciates efficiency, I'm going to file this next quirk in that category, and that is Aussies love shortening words. Macca for McDonald's, lolly for lollipop or sucker.
Now, I can understand that given our tendency to shorten words and put an E on the end, that you would think that lolly was short for lollipop, but in actual fact it's not. We call them lollipops. Lollies are, in a broad sense, what Americans call candies. So sugary sweets are lollies. We don't call chocolate lollies or candies, that's chocolate. But in Australia, a lolly is anything that is, it's a lolly, it's a candy, it's just your sugary treat. So, not lollipops. We call them lollipops. I don't think I've ever heard them referred to as lollies, other than if it was like if you were talking about a whole bunch of things together and there were lollipops in amongst the other lollies.
Brekkie for breakfast.
Well, I'm gonna see what a breakfast burrito is like in Australia, or what they call here a brekkie wrap.
Even the restroom hand dryer brand was Dolphy instead of Dolphin.
I will just give a correction here, and our tendency to shorten words has nothing to do with efficiency. It's just how we are in Australia. We're just a really laid back bunch of people. So if we can shorten it and make our lives easier and make less work for ourselves, then sure, that's what we're going to do. So we do talk about brekkie and arvo and servo and all words like that, because why put in the extra effort to say a really long word?
These last things all have to do with our hotel stays. Every electrical outlet has its own power switch. I'm guessing because it's a higher voltage than in the US.
There definitely is a significant difference in voltage between Australian things and American things. I'm not sure if it's the case in America, but electrocution in Australia will kill you, or has a pretty good chance of killing you. So it is law in Australia that you have the switches on each power point. And for me as an Australian, it does my head in to think that in America you plug things in and you pull things out of the socket without having the switch. Because in Australia you're trained that you switch things off at the socket before you unplug them, and then when you plug them in before you switch the socket on for safety. So yeah, that is one huge difference.
Also, the light switches are opposite what you would find in the US, with up being off and down being on. Now, this also was true on a Norwegian cruise ship we were on a few years ago, so maybe we're the weird ones. Now, there were some very pleasant hotel surprises. Firstly, in all cases, whether we were in a nice hotel or a cheap motel, we were provided with a hot water kettle, both coffee and tea, and most surprisingly, fresh cream. You won't see Coffee Mate anywhere.
Now, I've heard it said that the reason people don't have kettles in the US is because of the difference with the power points, in that there's not enough power in American power points to have kettles. But at the same time, several years back when I met my cousin's new wife, who is American, one of the things she mentioned was that after her first trip to Australia, the first thing she did when she got back to America was buy a kettle, because it is so much easier for making coffee than actually boiling it on a stove. So I found that interesting, because here in Australia, every household has a kettle for boiling water for coffee or tea. And it's not hot water, it's boiled water. So I should probably point that out. Pretty much every workplace, if they have coffee and tea if they have an area like a kitchen for coffee and tea, they're either going to have a kettle or they're going to have an urn. We love our coffee, we love our tea. Got to make it easy for ourselves. Now, the other thing I'm going to point out here is that what she's holding there is actually full cream milk, not cream. So in Australia, it's milk. What is cream here in Australia is like cream, the fluffy whipped stuff that goes on top of desserts, not milk. So I think seeing that there as full cream milk, she's just gone with, oh look, that's cream like we have in America. No, that's milk, which is what I think Americans call cream. Hope I haven't confused people there, but yeah, not cream, it's milk. And yeah, if you have a coffee station in a hotel or a Airbnb or whatever, chances are that there is going to be one of those little milk things in the fridge for you. It's just what we do here in Australia because, like I said, we all love our coffee.
Also, and again without exception, every place we stayed provided chilled water in the fridge. For free. The absolute weirdest thing, though, is that Australians, or Australian hotels anyway, apparently do not believe in washcloths.
Conditioner and shampoo, and not one but two washcloths.
You don't realize how...
Ding, 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 ding.
Yes. Does not happen at most other places.
That's the first time, except for the one place that gave the second washcloth was a take off your makeup washcloth.
With only 2 exceptions, we only received 1 washcloth, and in one case, none, for 2 people. Like, what the heck?
I find that really interesting because, for starters, yes, we do use washcloths here in Australia. So, no, we don't hate them or whatever. But I've never stayed anywhere that hasn't provided washcloths with towels. So I do find that somewhat curious, other than perhaps it is a hygiene thing. I don't know, or maybe the hotels that they're staying at are the ones where maybe they try to avoid things that are easier to steal. Maybe these are hotels that have stopped providing washcloths because people were taking the washcloths because they would be easy enough to shove in your bag and take with you as opposed to a towel. I don't know. It's curious. It's very, very curious. I'd like to know what other people's experiences are in terms of hotels, motels, Airbnb, etc. in Australia when it comes to washcloths. Now, she says at the end of this video here that she has more to add to this list and that they'll be in future videos. I haven't had a look yet on her channel to see if there are more videos like this, but if there are, I'm certainly going to do reactions to them because I find some of the things she's saying to be curious, some of them to be amusing, and some of them to be just downright strange. There is some interesting things there as well, of course, but yeah, I found this to be a rather interesting video. So, thanks for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so. Hit the like button and please leave a comment below.